Hello everybody, today we're going to be putting together a general purpose computer. Now for anybody out there who has never put together a computer before, I'm going to give you the step-by-steps on how to assemble a PC and what components you would need to purchase in order to do so. Now as you see in front of me, I have a numerous variety set of parts here and everything from the case fans, motherboard, video card, CPU, RAM, heatsink, and power supply. And of course, your hard drive. So we'll start assembling this and I will show you every part, why I purchased it, and the first component that we were going to talk about is the motherboard. So what I have done here is I've purchased an MSI X299 SLI Plus motherboard. Now this motherboard is excellent for a general purpose. It up and take a look. So as you can see here in the packaging, we have a big bag which contains the motherboard. And underneath it we have the various components such as the back plate and the here, as you can see, we have a basic motherboard with all of its ports that you normally see on a computer in the back. So you'll have your standard USB, your USB 3.0, two Ethernet ports, a USB Type-C port, and a 7-channel audio output as well. On the motherboard, you'll see that it supports 8 DIMMs, and it has the CPU. We also have support for 2 M2 type drives, so if you want a super fast NVMe drive, you can install it in these 2 sockets here. On the back, we have support for 8 SATA drives. So you have 6 here, and then 2 more on the motherboard here, as well as external SATA as well. For the CPU, I have decided to use the Core i5 7640X. Now this is currently, at the time of this video, the fastest i5 processor out on the market. Now the reason why I decided to go with an i5 instead of an i7 is because I really don't care too much about the core count. I don't care about hyper-threading. So the i5 is a non-hyper-threaded high-performance CPU that focuses more on clock speed with a total of 4 cores. Now when you compare the benchmarks on the CPU compared to its competitors, it does knock off the comparable i7 off the chart. So that being said, let's open it up and then we'll go ahead and install the CPU on the motherboard. So inside the box here, some instructions and of course the CPU itself. So I'm just going to open this up and crack open the plastic here. Okay, so now to get the CPU in place, what we're going to do is we're going to unlock the clamps that hold the CPU in place. And what we're going to do is we're going to open up this little door here. Now we need to pop out this little plastic plate and discard this, as we won't need it anymore. Now, when you take a look at the CPU, you will notice that there is a little arrow on the corner of the CPU. And you'll also see an arrow on the motherboard right here. Now those need to line up. Now the actual socket is actually keyed. You'll see these little notches on the CPU, and those match the notches in the socket itself. Now This is a 0 force socket, which means you just lay it in place. You don't need to touch anything. It just rests nicely in position. So what I'm going to do is carefully set it down. As you see, 0 force, it just rests. And what I'm going to do now is we're going to lock the CPU in place. Perfect. That is how we install this. For the memory, I decided to use the Corsair Engine LED DIMMs. Now these are DDR4 to 666 megahertz DIMMs. Now these are a total of 16 gigabytes. Now this is a comfortable amount of memory for a general purpose machine. It's not too little. The bare minimums for a Windows 10 machine would be 8 gigabytes. A lot of people out there, they purchase a computer from Dell or HP and they come with 4 gigabytes and they wonder why is the computer not performing that great. That's why, you just don't have enough memory. So now the nice thing about this memory here is it's got a nice LED strip along the top here, so this is going to light up nicely. And along with the motherboard, which also has LED strips all throughout, this whole motherboard is going to glow and it's going to look really awesome to the case. Now you're asking yourself, so you have 8 DIMM slots, so where do I put them? So this processor here supports dual channel memory, which means that you need to have 2 DIMMs minimum, and they will go into the number 1 sockets on both sides. So in this case here, we're going to start with the A's, and so we're going to go A1, and we're going to match it on the other side. Now you'll see here on the memory that it has a little key cutout, so you need to put it in a specific way. So what we're going to do is we're going to just slide that in. There we go, that's in place. And we're going to do the same thing on the other side, so match the key. And lock it in place. And that is all there is to it. So for the primary boot drive, what I'm going to be using, I'm going to be using a Samsung 960 Pro NVMe drive in the form factor of M2. So we're going to open this up. And here it is here. As you can see, it's a very, very, very tiny drive that looks like a stick of gum. And we're going to be installing it into the M2 slot here. So what we're going to need is a little Phillips screwdriver, and we are going to unscrew the set here, and we're going to lift up the shield. Now you'll see here that it's got a little piece of plastic on here covering the thermal compound. We're going to remove that, and we're going to take the NVMe drive, and it looks like we are going to need to set back the riser to the last position. And there we go. And then insert the NVMe drive into the slot. And then we rest the other end onto the riser here. Now we fold down the shield. And we grab our set screw. computer case itself. Now for the computer case, I got a Corsair Spec 01 case. Now this is a mid-tower case, and it's got a nice acrylic window, so you'll be able to see the insides. And the reason why I got this is just because it's cheap, right? This here cost me $60, and it's probably one of the cheapest components of this entire build. So to begin with, what we're going to do is we're just going to remove the side cover. So 2 thumb screws, and just put those down, and then we're going to remove the side. So now to work with this, it's best to do it laying down. So what I'm going to do is just flip it onto its side. Now, as you'll see inside one of the drive bays, we have a box full of all the parts. So what we're going to do is we're going to just take this and just open it up. And so what you'll see here is a bag of screws and a few zip ties. Okay. Now, what I'm going to do before I go ahead and install the motherboard, I am going to prepare the case by putting in the additional fans that I need. And now the setup I'm going to go for is a positive pressure setup, which means that there's more air coming in than going out. Now, the best part about having a positive pressure flow through a computer case is that all the air coming in will come through a filter which is in the front, and all the dust and everything will be captured inside that filter, and then nice clean hot air will come out any holes in the case. Now what's different between this and a negative pressure case, so a negative pressure would mean that you'd have the fans on the back and on the top, and you'd have more air coming out than coming in, which means that the air will come through any hole in the case, which means you'll get more dust and stuff inside the case instead of... Okay, so now we have finished putting in our intake and exhaust fans inside the PC case here. Now, the fans that I've chosen here are the Noctua 120mm fans. Now, the reason why I specifically went with Noctua is not because of the color. In fact, everybody does not like the color of Noctua fans, but it's the fact that they're very, very quiet. They are by far the quietest fans on the market. Being quiet is good, especially when you're sitting right beside the computer. You don't want to hear it humming and hawing, especially when you're doing video editing and other tasks which require, you know, a good sense of hearing on your plan is install the power supply. For the power supply, I've chosen a Corsair 650 watt power supply. Now, this is a modular power supply, which means I only have to use the cables that I need, so I don't have to worry about trying to hide and tuck away unused cables anywhere inside the case. Now, this is a pretty simple installation. All we're going to do is slide this into the bottom of the case, and then install the 4 screws in the back. Now that we've put in the power supply, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to install the backing plate for the motherboard. Now, the backing plate will just go into the back of the case, and it should just pop right into place with very little effort. Perfect. Just make sure everything is nice and snug, and it is. Now take your motherboard, and you're going to carefully set it into place. So, Now, this case specifically already has all the risers for the motherboard already put into an ATX configuration. So all I'm going to do is line everything up and drop it into place. Perfect. Now what we do is just go ahead and insert all the screws where all the screw holes are. Okay, so after we have everything all screwed down, now we're going to start plugging in some of the cables. So we're going to start with the system fan. Now the reason why we're doing this before we proceed to installing anything like the heatsink or the video card is because you actually need to be able to get your hands into the computer case to actually plug everything in. And the more stuff you have in your way, the harder it is to actually accomplish that. Now, what you want to make sure is that your cables are nice and tucked away, because you don't want to have cables slung all over your motherboard, because this will have a clear window on the side. You want to keep it as clean as possible. Now, the case comes with all these connectors. Now these are various connectors for the front panel, USB, audio, etc., etc. Now, these are primarily going to plug in all throughout the bottom of the motherboard here, and there's a connector here on the side for this guy as well. So I'm just going to go ahead and plug all these things in. I'm going to move the case all over the place so that I can wire them nice and clean. So forgive me if I don't get this on video, but you will see the end product. Okay, and then through the magic of video, we have now hooked up all of the fans and all the front panel on the case to the motherboard, and all the connectors are down here at the very bottom of the motherboard. Now every motherboard will be different, so you need to use your manual to know exactly which pin to pop all those little connectors onto. It should be pretty straightforward. Now most of the time that you're going to do is just to make sure that the wires are all nice and cleaned and tied up behind the motherboard. So if I were to flip this around, you'll see that all the wires are behind the motherboard, nice and hidden. It doesn't look nice, it's like a nest of wires, but not to worry, once you put the case side on, you'll never see these wires. We're going to go ahead and install the CPU heatsink. Now, what I have done here is I have gone ahead and got another Noctua fan. Again, this is for being quiet, and this one here is designed for 145 watts of thermal output. The processor that I have is 112 watt, so this will be able to cool the processor very easily. So basically what we're going to do is we're going to open up the box, take out the heatsink. Now this heatsink is designed for different socket types, so it's kind of like a one device fits all. And so what we need to do is match up the proper, bracket onto the motherboard to then connect the heatsink on. Now here you can see this is the heatsink itself. As you can see, it's pretty big, and this is why I'm not putting it on until now, because I needed to hook up all of these wires first. So, without further ado, I will mount the bracket here to the motherboard, and then I will mount by putting the risers into position. So, just using my hands here, and then just screwing these risers into the predefined holes on the CPU socket. Now there will be 4 of these. Now once that's done, what we're going to do is we're going to grab these positioning bars and just put these into position. Okay, perfect. Now the next thing you're going to do is we have to install or put on a thermal compound. Now thermal compound, what that's used to do is just a type of grease that's used to transfer heat from one surface to another. Now we're going to use a pea-size amount on this. So let's just unscrew this. Now pea-size, so if you ever had peas before, go to the frozen food aisle. It's a small amount of thermal compound, about the size of the end of your little pinky. And you want to put this in the dead center of the CPU. Okay, there we go. Now that's a pea-size amount. So, next what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the heatsink, and now I need to remove the fan off of this so that I'm able to screw the heatsink down onto the mounts that were provided. So I'm just going to carefully just unclip that and then unclip the other side. Perfect. Now, this fan type, I could put the fan on either side, so I can make it pull the air through or push the air through. Take the heat sink. Now let's set it down. And she'll sit on the bracket. Now I will push down. This is spring loaded, by the way. Okay, your heatsink is now on. Now, it's just time to place this in the direction. So this is going to bring the air through this way. Now I'm going to position this in a way that it just reaches the connectors. What I'll do is I will, this way is this way. Okay. So what I'm going to do is plug this thing into the motherboard first, and it's going to go into the CPU fan 1 socket. Perfect. That is installed. And then just put this into position. Like so, and grab this one here. Great. Perfect. Okay, so for the video card, I'm using an MSI card, and now this is the Radeon RX 580. This is a high-performance gaming card. And this here will allow me to do everything from playing video games to be able to do quick rendering while video editing. And of course it has support for multi-monitor, as you can see here. Now, the reason why I picked this card is because it has 2 HDMI outs, which is very hard to find even on the NVIDIA cards. And I am a big Radeon fan, so I have put Radeons in all my computers ever since I started building computers more than 20 years ago. Okay, perfecto, that's lined up. And now I can seat the card. Perfect. And that goes in nicely. Okay, so next what I'm going to do is I'm going to install the set screws for the video card so that it doesn't move around inside the case. And this will give it some support. So this will take 2 screws. Perfect. So now what we're going to do is it's time to actually wire up all the power. Now all the power will come through the bottom and route behind the case and plug into the bearings. We've gone ahead and we've put in all the power cables down below and we've tucked them in behind the rear of the case. I've already put on the back panel to make sure everything fits nice. So yeah, now we have a nice clean and completed computer. So now is the fun part. It's time to put the cover on, plug it in, and install Windows. And we'll do that in another episode.